Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all in good condition. Okay, as I promised yesterday, I'm going to record our presentation about one topic in our class, which is teaching receptive skills. So please watch and listen to my presentation whenever you are available, and make sure all of you listen to this presentation until the end of my presentation, because there are some instructions that you need to follow up at the end of my presentation. Okay, thank you. So today I'm going to discuss one chapter from Jeremy Herner's book, specifically about teaching receptive skills. So let's start first with the definition. What are receptive skills? I've seen from some answers that you have provided in your Google Classroom that I think most of you have answered correctly, that receptive skills relate to two skills in language, that is listening and reading skills, because these skills are related to the ways in which people extract meaning from the discourse that they see or hear. So see in this case is reading, and here is in this case is listening. So when you are able to listen to what you are hearing, and when you are able to get understanding from what you are reading or what you are seeing, that means you have receptive skills. So in opposed to the receptive skills, we have other terms for this, which is productive skill. That is the skill related to skill when you can produce language. In this case is speaking and writing. But in this case, in this particular presentation, I'm going to specifically discuss about how to teach receptive skills. That means how to teach listening and reading. Okay, let's start first from theory of reading and listening. When we are going to teach reading and listening, we need to first analyze how people normally read and listen. So maybe you can reflect on your own experience, guys, how you normally read and listen. And I think your own reflection or our own answers would lead us to these two answers. That is, in many cases, when we read something or when we listen to something, when we are trying to understand what we are reading and what we are listening, most of the time we are going to use what we call by schemata. Schemata is pre-existing knowledge of the world or of the topic that we are reading and listening. So this schemata, or the pre-existing or background knowledge of the topic, will help us to understand what we are reading and what we are listening. So for example, if you are about to listen to football game news, for example, every knowledge that you know about football game, that you know that football game is a game which is played by 11 players, for example, and then the game will last for 45 minutes, and so on and so forth. This kind of knowledge will help you understand the text more easily. So when you can make use of this knowledge, that means you are making use what we call by schemata. Yeah, and the same case happens when you are reading. When the topic is, for example, it's about COVID-19, for example. So even only by looking at the topic, the title of the text, you can make use of your pre-existing knowledge about COVID-19 to make a guess. The text would probably about blah, 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 because in your own mind, you have some pre-existing knowledge about what is COVID-19. It was a kind of new virus first found in Wuhan, China, for example. It was spread out throughout the world very quickly, transmitted from people to people, from droplet, and it is very dangerous and blah, 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 blah. So if you have this kind of knowledge in your mind, that's what we call by schemata. So in many cases, your schemata will help you understand the text, either listening or reading text. Okay. All right. And when we are thinking of how to teach listening and reading, we need also to be aware of some reasons why people reading and listening. Can you please think some ideas, guys, in your mind? Why do you think you are reading a text in your life? Why you particularly interested in listening to a special or particular text or particular listening text, for example? Why are you reading and why are you listening? Generally, people are reading text or listening to a text because of instrumental reason. What is instrumental reason? That is the reason when you have to read because you would like to find out an information, for example. When I ask you, when I provide you a text in the classroom, for example, and I ask you to answer some questions following the text, that is a kind of instrumental reason for you to read, okay? So when you have a very specific purpose of finding out a certain information from a text that you are about to read or you are about to listen, this is instrumental reason. But people read and listen not only because of that instrumental reason, some people also read because of pleasurable. So that's why there is a term, what we say by reading for pleasure, for example. What is pleasurable? That is when you read text because you want to get like happiness from what you are reading. You want to get pleasurable moment from what you are reading and you are listening to. Okay? So in this case, when you love reading novel, for example, short stories or some kinds of text like that, or when you are listening to when you're listening to song, for example, or when you are watching a movie, so you decide to watch particular movie with your own reason. You do it not because of instrumental reason, but you do it because of pleasurable reason, because you are happy to do that. Okay, so what does this imply to your reading and listening class later? As a teacher, you need to consider these two reasons why your student can read and listen later. So provide them, not only providing them with some instrumental reason or some instruction to do, but also try to provide a situation when they feel happy to read something and to listen to something. Okay, so instrumental and pleasurable reasons. Okay, and then there is another point that we need to consider when we are teaching these receptive skills or listening and reading. There is top-down and bottom-up strategies. As you have answered quite well in your Google Classroom, I think most of your answers are correct. The top-down and bottom-up strategies refer to, okay, the process that you are doing to understand meaning from what you are reading and you are listening. So in top-down process, as the name says, top down. So from the top to down process. So what does it mean? This is the process when the reader or listener gets a general view of the reading or listening passage, and in some way observing the overall picture. So if we come back to schemata theory, okay, when you have a text with the title, The Danger of COVID-19, for example, you look at the title and you use your background knowledge to understand the title, and you haven't really read the whole part of the text yet. So just look at the title and then activate your schemata, and then just look at maybe a picture provided in the text, maybe a picture of coronavirus. So, and then look at also like if there are some headings in the text. So look at the title, look at the picture, look at the heading, and activating your own schemata. That and then after that you try to understand the text more or less would probably about the dangers of coronavirus. It can kill people. It transmits very quickly, and there is no no vaccine yet. Blah blah blah. You haven't really read the details of the text, but you are trying to make a general sense of the text. If you do this way to understand the text, that means you are practicing top-down process. Okay, top-down process. And in contrast to top-down process, there is what we call the bottom-up process. Just like the name. What is bottom-up process? Like the opposite of top-down. Unlike top-down, where you try to understand a text by looking at the general picture of the text, in the bottom-up process, you as a reader or listener try to focus on individual words or phrases, yeah, provided in the text. So if we come back to the text of coronavirus, you don't really pay attention first to, let's say, the heading or the title or some bold phrases provided in the text, but you read carefully every bit information provided in the text. Look at you look at the sentence, look at the particular phrases used in the text until finally you get the general understanding of the text. So if you do this, this is what we call by bottom-up process. So what does this imply to your teaching and learning process later in your class, everyone? So you need to consider these two processes. Sometimes you can apply top-down process in your reading class or in the listening class. You ask your student, for example, to pay attention to general mark or some pictures provided in your text. But in some other occasions, you need also to provide an activity where students can practice their bottom-up process in understanding, reading, and listening text. Okay. All right, and when you are teaching receptive skill, in this case is reading or listening, you need also to be aware in your mind that you need to teach them some sub skills in reading, both reading and listening. Yeah, for example, you need to teach them how to identify the topic, yeah, and predicting and guessing. You know, in teaching reading text, you're not only teaching them vocabulary, but how can they quickly identify the topic, for example. So that's why if you are doing reading tests, there is always a test asking, for example, what is the title of the text, for example, or what is the topic of the sentence. Okay, so this is the skill that you need to develop and teach your student, and also to predict and make a guess. Okay, predicting means when you are trying to predict what's going to happen next after a certain paragraph, or you're going to predict or you to make a guess of the meaning of certain words. Okay, you know, when you are reading and listening to a text and you don't understand a certain vocabulary, you don't have to stop. And you don't have to quickly come back to your dictionary, for example. You can try to make a guess by looking at the whole text, the whole context provided around the text. Okay, and also you need to teach the students about listening for general understanding. Okay, and then teach them how they can find specific information. Specific information, in this case, is teaching them a scanning skill. If you talk about general understanding, you need to teach them the skill what we call by skimming skill. So skimming, scanning, predicting, okay, or making a guess or guessing, and listening for detailed information, okay, interpreting text. Yeah, this is another skill that you need to develop. So basically what I'm saying is, when you are teaching students reading and listening skill, you need to make sure that you are teaching these sub skills, okay, under reading and listening skills. All right, you can come back to your book, Jeremy Harmer's book, and then I think you can find more details explanation about this. Okay, and as a teacher, we also need to be aware of some potential problems that might happen when we are teaching reading and listening to the students. So next section, I'm going to talk about what are the problems and what solution that we can do to overcome the problems. Okay, the first problem that we might encounter when teaching reading is the language problem. Okay, what I mean by language problem is maybe this related to the complexity of the language. Probably the vocabulary is too difficult for students to understand, or maybe the structure of the sentence is so complicated. So it is very likely that your student don't understand what the text means because of the complexity of the language. Okay, so of course, depending on the level of your students, yeah, the higher the level, the more complex the language will be. So be aware of this problem. And then later we'll talk about the solution. And also topic and genre, you know, different, when we are teaching reading and listening, problem also probably about the topic. Some topics are familiar with students, but some others are not. Especially, I think, have you experienced taking tests, or in this case is TOEFL test? You know, when you are taking TOEFL test, you will deal with some kinds of reading text, and some reading text topics are familiar for you, but some others are not. So it creates problems. So in my case, for example, because I come from social science background, if the topic is about education, about social issue, it's easier for me to understand compared to topic like a technical topic like engineering topic or medical topic, which is not really familiar for me. So the unfamiliarity of the topic can make students find certain text difficult. So you need to be aware of that. And also genre. So genre basically is a kind of text. You know, you have been learning genre in your senior high school, right? So there are some genre in English text, like narrative text, recount text, fictive text, expository text, and so on and so forth. So different genre could have different problems, or could create different difficulties for students. Okay, and then the next one is comprehension task. So what we mean by comprehension task here is like list of questions follow up the text. So normally in a classroom, if you provide students, text to learn, of course you need to test students' understanding about the text that you are using for your teaching. And normally to see students' understanding, you have to provide some comprehension question. So different comprehension question could also have different problem for students. And then another problem is negative expectation. What we mean by negative expectation is some students perceive certain text negatively, or they are not really motivated to certain kinds of text. So it can also create problems in your class. So what are the rules? What are the possible solutions to this kind of problem? Let's first talk about language.